Okay, have you ever felt powerless? Well, I want you to imagine being held captive in your own home for 20 years. And your captor, a single mosquito. We're going to dive into Fernando Sorrentino's absolutely brilliant and bizarre story, Waiting for a Resolution, where the smallest creature you can imagine holds all the power.
Right off the bat, the story hits you with this insane, almost funny imbalance of power. You've got our narrator, a full-grown man, close to 180 pounds, and on the other side, his tormentor, a creature that is literally weightless. But in this world, you quickly learn that physical size means absolutely nothing.
And there it is, straight from the narrator himself. This one simple, devastating sentence just sets the whole stage. This isn't a nuisance, it's not an annoyance. This is total, absolute subjugation. So you have to be asking, how in the world did this happen? And more importantly, how has it lasted for so long? Let's get into the first part and try to wrap our heads around the truly mind-bending reality of this man's life under his tiny, buzzing tyrant. 20 years. Just let that sink in for a second. This completely flies in the face of nature, right? A mosquito lives for, what, a few weeks, a couple of months, tops? So this impossible timeline, it isn't just some weird detail. No, it's a huge part of the narrator's psychological torture, and it's a mystery that he is desperate to solve. And here's something you've got to understand. The mosquito's power isn't based on respect or admiration. It's built on one thing, and one thing only: pure, uncut terror. The narrator lives every single day in fear that this creature, this thing he could literally crush with his thumb, could just as easily decide to kill him. Now, this isn't just some vague, random fear. Oh no, the mosquito has set up an entire system. There's a whole set of rules and rituals that are as specific as they are completely absurd. This is the very architecture of its oppression. And just look at how bureaucratic this little dictatorship is. The mosquito demands Spanish blood pudding, and it gets indignant if it's served the local Argentine kind. It has to be served on a very specific little china dish, and the narrator himself has to leave the room while it eats. See, these aren't just funny quirks, they are daily rituals of humiliation that just constantly reinforce who's really in charge here. And this is where you really get a glimpse into the narrator's mind. He doesn't see his home as a house anymore. He starts using the language of politics to describe it. The dining room is now the seat of office, and the mosquito isn't just flying around, it's inspecting its domains. His home has become a tiny little country, and his its only and very captive citizen. Of course, you're probably wondering, did he ever try to fight back? Well, he did. Once. He armed himself with a shoe, he snuck up on the sleeping mosquito, but his tyrant woke up. And what came next was this terrifying chase through the house that ended with our narrator just collapsing on the floor, completely and utterly broken. And that desperate plea? That's the sound of his spirit just snapping in two. That one failed revolution completely solidified his surrender. The terror of that moment was so intense that he swore to himself he would never, ever try to fight for his freedom again. Okay, so by now, you've probably figured out this story is about a little more than just a man and a bug. This is where we start to peel back the layers and look at the incredible political allegories Sorrentino has built. So, just so we're all on the same page, an allegory is basically a story that's working on two levels at once. You have the surface story, man versus mosquito, and then you have the hidden symbolic meaning. And in this case, that hidden meaning is all about power, fear, and what it's like to live under a totalitarian government. And the parallels are just so clear. When the narrator spies through the keyhole, it's not just him being nosy. It represents the citizens' fearful obsession with their rulers. Those crazy arbitrary demands for Spanish pudding, well, that mirrors the completely irrational whims of a dictatorship. And his theories about usurpers, that gets right to the heart of how these oppressive systems manage to stay in power for so long. So, to explain how this one mosquito has lived for 20 years, the narrator develops two theories. The first is that there's a secret succession going on, that old mosquitoes are secretly being replaced by new, younger ones. The second theory, which is maybe even more chilling, is that the power doesn't belong to any single mosquito. It belongs to the office itself. Any mosquito that takes up that position becomes the ruler.
And that right there is the central point of the whole thing. It doesn't actually matter who the dictator is. In an oppressive system, the real power is in the structure, in the institution, in that seat of office. The individual leader is basically interchangeable, and that's how tyranny can feel like it's immortal, like it can outlive any one person. So all of this brings us to our final section, and to the title of the story itself, Waiting for a Resolution. And believe me, that word, waiting, is absolutely everything. It defines the narrator's entire existence. And here they are, the final, haunting lines of the story. After 20 years of this nightmare, after all of his theories and his quiet observations, absolutely nothing has changed. He is just trapped, growing old, withering away, passively waiting for something, anything, to finally resolve the situation.
And this is the ultimate tragedy of the story. Yes, the mosquito is real, but the true prison is the narrator's own mind. He's completely paralyzed by his own anxiety. He can imagine a world where he could be free, but the fear of being wrong, the terror that trying to find out for sure could prove fatal, that's what really keeps him in chains. So we're left with this huge, powerful question. What exactly is the resolution that he's waiting for? Is it just his own death? Is it a revolution that he's too terrified to actually start? Or maybe the only real resolution is for him to finally realize that he's been his own jailer this whole time. The story doesn't give us an answer, and it leaves us to wonder about the invisible walls we all build in our own minds.